Welcome back to another deep dive.
Yeah, it is great to be back.
Today, we are opening up a file that is, honestly, it's a little uncomfortable to look at directly.
It really is.
It's specific, it's geopolitical, and it challenges, a lot of assumptions about what success actually looks like in the 21st century.
Right.
We are digging into episode 17 of the serialized analysis AI Futures, authored by Jafar Humayun.
And before we get into the weeds, we should probably set the stage properly for anyone joining us midstream.
Definitely. Because there is a mandatory framing here. I need to state this clearly right up front.
Go for it.
AI Futures is not a forecast, it's a framework.
Exactly. We aren't predicting stock prices for next Tuesday. We are looking at structural currents.
The things that move slowly but with massive force.
Yeah. And just to orient everyone, in our last deep dive, episode 16, which was called the BPO inversion, we looked at the developing world.
Right, that was a heavy one. We unpacked how the global back office model is dissolving.
Because remote service delivery is basically being bypassed in favor of internal AI stacks.
Swapping human teams for algorithms. But today, we are pivoting the lens completely. We are looking at the developed world, specifically the European Union.
And this is where Humayun's framework gets really fascinating, because usually when we talk about AI and Europe, the conversation is either about their amazing regulation.
Or it's a complaint about why they don't have their own tech giants.
Exactly.
But the title of this installment is The Strategic Edge Node. And I'll be honest, when I saw we were covering Europe and AI, I expected a story about a crash.
Like an economic disaster.
Yeah, exactly. Markets tumbling, things falling apart, that sort of thing. But Humayun is arguing something much quieter. He calls it strategic attrition.
It is quiet, and that's precisely why it's so profound. This isn't a story about a loud collapse. There's no fire, no rebellion.
Right.
It is about a shift in foundational relevance that happens through dependency. It's about how a continent can remain incredibly wealthy and principled,
While transitioning from being the engine of the world to merely a premium subscriber.
a premium subscriber. That phrase is just, it's so accurate.
It really is. And that's our mission for this deep dive. How does a region remain wealthy while losing foundational relevance?
Well, to understand that, we have to start with the hardware, what the text calls the engine deficit.
Let's unpack that, because Europe used to be the ultimate builder, right? They exported thought, science, the Industrial Revolution.
They were the engine.
But now, the text points out, Europe lacks sovereign foundation models and hyperscale compute.
That is the core of the engine deficit. Instead of exporting the future, they import it.
They've transitioned from being a builder to a digital tenant.
Digital tenant, yes.
Humayun highlights this mechanism of licensing dependency, which basically means that even when European firms do build things, they are often operating within sandboxes owned by external power.
All right, the specific examples in the text really drive this home. Paris is building with American weights,
Berlin is training on U.S. cloud infrastructure,
and Amsterdam is prototyping inside someone else's system.
which means you are entirely dependent on the ecosystem of the landlord.
Exactly. You can decorate your digital apartment however you want. You can build great apps. But if the underlying ecosystem shifts, if an API access rule changes across the ocean,
Your whole operation in Europe has to pivot.
you are involved, certainly. It's a lucrative market, but you are no longer foundational. You are a digital tenant.
So that's the infrastructure dependency, the hardware side. But we also have to look at the human element. The text pivots to what it calls the demographic trap.
This section was stark.
It really was, because it asks, is there a workforce ready to fix this infrastructure gap? And the answer Humayun gives is demographic headwinds.
Right. We are talking about declining birth rates and a shrinking youth population.
And the text draws this sharp contrast with regions like India or parts of Africa.
Because those regions have a surplus of human capital. They
Oh.
have millions of young people who can be repurposed, trained, and thrown at new technological paradigms.
Europe has no surplus youth to repurpose. There is no demographic tailwind to ride here.
None at all. And it creates what the text calls a structural incapacity.
Which is really a clash of cultures, isn't it?
Completely. Think about what AI development demands right now. It demands extreme agility, massive risk-taking, and incredible speed. It breaks things constantly.
Right. But the European system is rooted in process, tradition, and consensus.
Which are fantastic things for a stable, wealthy society. You want process, you want consensus.
Sure, if you're managing a stable state. But when you need high-speed AI adaptation,
That reliance on process becomes a structural incapacity. They physically and culturally cannot adapt at the speed the technology requires.
so they don't have the compute infrastructure and they don't have the agile surplus demographics to build it from scratch,
Right.
which naturally brings up what Europe actually is doing, because they aren't just sitting still, they're heavily involved in governance.
The Brussels effect.
Exactly. The GDPR, the AI Act, the Digital Services Act, Europe is the global leader in regulation.
And the source material completely validates that effort. It isn't saying regulation is a bad thing,
No, it's highly principled.
but Humayun anchors it in this incredibly hard logic. He writes, you cannot regulate what you cannot build.
You cannot regulate what you cannot build. That is a massive statement.
It is the central tension. Rules don't run models. Ethics committees don't generate training data.
So you end up with what the text frames as a clock speed disconnect.
Yes. Let's break that down. Think about parliamentary speed.
Right. The time it takes to draft a law, debate it, amend it, build consensus across multiple countries, and finally pass it.
That takes years. Now contrast that with token speed. The speed at which these AI models are evolving and generating new capabilities.
It's a matter of months, sometimes
But-
weeks.
Exactly. By the time a comprehensive regulation makes it through the European Parliament, the technology has evolved 2 or 3 generations past the rules.
So Humayun is saying this isn't a moral failure on Europe's part, it's a timing failure, a clock speed disconnect.
Europe remains principled, absolutely, but they are structurally outpaced by the technology itself.
Which brings us to the impact on the ground. For the actual people living in this system, the text calls this the deterioration of the professional ladder.
This is where strategic attrition hits the individual.
Right, because we know factory roles have been automated for a long time.
Yeah.
And in our last deep dive, we talked about back office services being eliminated globally. But in Europe, Humayun points out that management layers are now being thinned by orchestration systems.
It is a compression of the middle class. The traditional professional ladder, where you start junior, learn the ropes, and move up to management, that ladder provided immense social stability.
But now those middle rungs are being absorbed by AI, which leads to this concept Humayun introduces called static scaffolds.
That term is brilliant. Static scaffolds.
Explain how he defines that, because it's a bit chilling.
A static scaffold is a job that still has its title. You still have the badge. You still go to the office and sit at the desk.
The scaffold of the job remains.
Right. But the cognitive output, the actual decision-making, the analysis, the strategy, has been absorbed by external algorithms.
So you might still be called a supply chain manager, but the AI is doing the actual routing and forecasting. You're just approving its decisions.
You're monitoring a dashboard.
Yeah?
The job exists in name, but it has been structurally decoupled from innovation.
That makes the professional ladder incredibly hollow. It looks stable from the outside, but the core cognitive work is gone.
And that leads perfectly into the final paradox of this whole analysis, the wealth paradox.
Right, because if you walk around a European capital today, it doesn't look like a region in crisis.
Not at all.
The cafes are full, the transit works, the GDP isn't collapsing. They still seem incredibly rich and stable.
Which is why Humayun uses the term strategic relevance by attrition.
You can stay wealthy while becoming completely dependent.
That is the paradox. You don't have to be poor to lose your sovereignty.
It's the shift from being a designer to a subscriber.
Yes, a designer writes the rules of the epoch, they build the core systems.
And a subscriber just pays to use them.
Exactly. The implication here is massive. Think about the core rules of finance or health diagnostics or even governance protocols.
Yeah.
If those are all running on AI,
And the AI is built outside of Europe.
then the core rules of your society are being deployed from elsewhere.
Europe just becomes a premium user, highly developed, paying top dollar for the enterprise tier of the service, but absolutely no longer holding the source code.
Operational dependency. It is a quiet certainty.
I really appreciate how the text maintains this tone. It isn't alarmist, it's just observing a strategic narrowing.
Right. If the current gap in sovereign compute persists, their ability to self-determine the next technological epoch may narrow. It is conditional, but the structural reality is there.
Which brings us to the synthesis of the episode's title, the strategic edge node.
Right. In network architecture, the core is where the processing happens. The edge node is just where the data is received and displayed.
So yours is high-tech, it's ethical, it's wealthy, but it is on the edge of the network, not at the core.
It's a recognition of power dynamics based entirely on who owns the compute.
No fire, no rebellion, just a quiet shift into becoming a premium subscriber.
It fundamentally changes how you view geopolitical relevance.
It really does.
Yeah.
And that wraps up our analysis for this deep dive. But the framework keeps going.
Oh, it gets even deeper.
For our next installment, we are moving to episode 18, The Silent Leak.
I am really looking forward to that one.
It builds right on this idea of dependency. And Humayun leaves us with this mandatory quote to set up the next topic. He writes, "You're not importing software, you're exporting sovereignty."
That is going to be a fascinating conversation.
It's a profound thought to leave you with as you think about the software your own companies are using. Are you a designer or a premium subscriber?
Something to think about.
Stay tuned for the next deep dive. Stay curious.
Stay systemic.